Imagine waking up with no memory of your name, your family, or the life you once lived. Imagine doctors smiling at you, saying they were helping, while secretly tearing your mind apart in the name of science. This isn't a dystopian film. It was real. It was called Project MKUltra. Born in the paranoia of the Cold War, MKUltra was the CIA's attempt to control the human mind. Whispers of Nazi scientists experimenting with hypnosis and chemicals had already spread after World War II. The Soviets were rumored to be developing their own psychological weapons. American leaders believed the battlefield of the future wouldn't be fought with tanks or planes, but with thoughts, obedience, and memories. Fear of being left behind, fear of losing not just wars but entire ideologies, became the spark that lit one of the darkest programs in American history. In 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles authorized a secret program, one so vast it reached across prisons, universities, hospitals, even unsuspecting neighborhoods. The man placed in charge was Sidney Gottlieb, a chemist who quietly became known as the poisoner-in-chief. He believed the key to unlocking the mind, or shattering it, was LSD. And under his command, more than 150 sub-projects were launched, each one a test to see how far human consciousness could bend before it broke. The methods were chilling. Volunteers were recruited through front companies, told they were helping science. Some walked away forever changed, like Ken Kesey, who would later write One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest after experiencing CIA drug trials at Stanford. But many others never agreed to be a part of this. They were lured in, tricked, or outright imprisoned. Inmates in federal prisons were dosed with hallucinogens day after day, sometimes for months. They were watched like lab rats as paranoia set in, as personalities fractured, as men once considered sane unraveled before the scientists' eyes. Some prisoners begged for release, some pleaded for death. Few ever recovered. In Montreal, at the Allen Memorial Institute, patients came seeking relief from depression, anxiety, or everyday struggles. Instead, they became test subjects for Dr. Ewan Cameron, secretly funded by the CIA. He tried to erase minds completely and build them back from scratch. His methods were brutal electroshock therapy 30 times stronger than the accepted norm, drugs that plunged patients into weeks-long comas, and endless loops of recorded messages played into their ears. When many woke, they no longer recognized their families. Some forgot how to walk, how to feed themselves, how to be human. Their lives had been stolen in the name of research. But the darkest story was that of Frank Olson, a CIA biochemist who thought he was among colleagues. In 1953, he was invited to a retreat where, without his knowledge, his drink was spiked with LSD. Within hours, he became unhinged, questioning not only his reality, but the morality of the work he had been part of. He began speaking about leaving the CIA, about exposing what he knew. 9 days later, he fell or was pushed from the 13th floor of a New York hotel. His death was ruled a suicide. But years later, when his body was exhumed, the autopsy revealed injuries consistent with a violent assault before the fall. His family became convinced that Frank Olson hadn't jumped. He had been silenced. Olson's story is just one thread in a web of fear. There were soldiers dosed without warning, wandering the barracks in terror as their minds dissolved. There were students who thought they were volunteering for harmless research, only to be haunted by hallucinations for years. There were ordinary men and women whose names never made headlines, whose lives collapsed quietly in locked hospital rooms while the world outside went on, unaware. For years, MKUltra thrived in the shadows. Then, in 1973, as investigations into the CIA loomed, Director Richard Helms ordered nearly all documents destroyed. Decades of experiments gone in an instant. But by chance, about 20,000 records survived, buried in a financial archive. What those fragments revealed shocked the world. One project, codenamed Operation Midnight Climax, involved CIA safe houses in San Francisco disguised as brothels. Men were lured inside, dosed with LSD without their knowledge, and watched through two-way mirrors while agents recorded their every move. The agents claimed it was about testing vulnerability. In reality, it was about seeing how far they could manipulate without being caught. The image of government-paid prostitutes luring unsuspecting men into apartments where spiked drinks and hidden microphones waited feels like something out of a paranoid thriller. But it wasn't fiction. It was policy. When the truth began to leak in the 1970s, outrage spread. The Church Committee and Rockefeller Commission hauled witnesses before Congress. Senators listened, horrified, as tales of drugging, hypnosis, and psychological torture were laid bare. The revelations showed that the CIA had not only crossed moral lines, it had erased them completely. President Gerald Ford responded by signing an order banning experiments on citizens without consent. But by then, the damage was irreversible. Victims filed lawsuits. Some were compensated, but most were left with nothing, empty memories, broken lives, and a permanent sense that their trust in institutions had been betrayed. Officially, the CIA insists MKUltra ended in the 1960s, but whispers suggest the research continued under new names, projects like MK Search and MK Often. The techniques developed in those years never really disappeared. Some see traces of them in later scandals, in strange assassins, in cult leaders who seem to bend followers' minds with ease. Others believe MKUltra bled into culture itself, shaping novels, films, and conspiracy theories. The name has become shorthand for government deception and human manipulation, and that might be the most lasting effect of all the way MKUltra rewired our collective imagination. The idea that the mind is vulnerable, that memory can't be trusted, that governments can and will trespass into the most private parts of who we are. It seeded doubt that still grows today, each time we hear of surveillance, propaganda, or enhanced interrogation. But the real story is more unsettling than any rumor. It's a reminder of how fragile identity really is, how quickly memory and willpower can be stolen, reshaped, or erased when people in power decide it's worth the risk. Frank Olson's death. The erased lives in Montreal. The endless nights in prison cells flooded with LSD. These weren't accidents. They were choices, calculated and cold. And when documents were burned, when files vanished into smoke, it wasn't just evidence being destroyed, it was lives being erased twice. Once in the laboratory, and again in history. Project MKUltra wasn't just an experiment. It was a warning written in silence and shadows. A warning that, given enough fear, even democracies will cross into places darker than their enemies ever imagined. The records may be burned, the officials may be gone, but the victims remain. And their stories force us to ask, if this happened in secret once, what else could be happening now, under different names, hidden in plain sight? That's the chilling legacy of MKUltra. Not just the broken minds or ruined lives, but the pattern it revealed, that power, when cloaked in secrecy, will always push past morality. A pattern hidden in history, resurfacing again and again. An unseen pattern that warns us the line between protection and control is far thinner than we want to believe.